This is a Stanadyne injection pump out of an old 410 John Deere backhoe. A little history on these pumps. This is a rotary injection pump. Same if you've got a Rusa Master injection pump, it's the same thing as a Stanadyne pump. The story on these things is there was a guy named Vernon Rusa back in the late 40s, I believe it was 46 or 47, and he was looking for an alternate method to power a diesel engine versus the inline pump. All the diesel engines back then were inline pumps, and a lot of the tractors in the agricultural industry and a lot of other things too, you know, diesel gensets, things like that, were all gas engines because the inline injection pump was very expensive to manufacture. And any of you, those of you who've been around these things, you know how big and long, take like on a Dodge pickup, like a 12 valve, if you had one with that inline pump on there, how long and bulky they were versus the VE pump, and how much more room, you know, you saved putting a rotary pump on there. And these were way simpler, way more cost effective to build and to rebuild. On inline pumps, I rebuilt a lot of these Stanadyne pumps for these farmers, and I rebuilt a lot of the Lucas CAV. Let's see here, just in the last 2-3 weeks, I did a DPA pump on an old Perkins and a hay squeeze, and then I did one on 1118 New Holland Swather, and that had a Lucas CAV DPS pump. And actually, I've got a DES pump out of a HW320 New Holland at my other shop, torn apart. But I'll cover this Stanadyne pump. Actually, you know, I was thinking about that. If you read up on the history, this guy named Vernon Rusa, he came up to and pitched this idea to Stanadyne Corporation, and he was installing gensets for some company there in New York, and he was looking for a better way to power them with a diesel engine and you know, an alternate method besides the inline pump. So that's where it all came from, as this guy was Vernon Rusa. So this is a 4-cylinder. Usually you'll see on the model plate here, like this one's actually, I think, a JD part number. No, that's Stanadyne, but it's JD B431. It's a B4. It's a DB. The J is for, I'm pretty sure, is for the John Deere, but the DB431 right there. That's a 4-cylinder, and I've actually got another pump out of a. I've got some spare parts here for Stanadyne pumps for people that threw stuff away. But here's a housing that came off an International UD282, and see, it's the same thing. This one actually says Rusa Master on the plate, and that one says Stanadyne on it. But it's the same, pretty much the same pump, except this one, if you read the model number, if we can get the old camera to focus, that's a DBGF631. It's a 6-cylinder. See that 6 number in there? This came with the 6-cylinder. You'll have 6 ports on your pumping unit back here instead of 4. So these aren't really too bad to do. A lot of people were scared of them. I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you, the first one I ever did, I was a little nervous, but I really took my time on probably the first 10 of them I ever did, and was really meticulous. And I mean, anymore I'm pretty fast. But we'll go through this one with let's tear this one apart and let's see what happened with it. I got a feeling we've got probably where the weight basket attaches to the drive assembly, I think is probably going to be broke or something like that, because the flange bolts here that go into the front timing cover came loose, and it was sagging and hanging on the shaft. Because on these Stanadyne pumps, you'll see a slot down in there with a dot in it, and the shaft, I left the shaft with the umbrella seals on the I just pop the flange bolts and slide them off the shafts, and when I put them back on, I'll put 2 new umbrella seals on the shaft, and then I'll pull it back in, and I take a flat O-ring pick, and I'll work my first umbrella seal in and slide it onto the shaft. But the CAV pumps, you can't do that. You got to actually pop your injection drive pump gear loose and pop the pump out. But that's just kind of a cheating way to do it without having to do that on these. So let me get my tools ready. The first thing we'll do is get it in the vise, and we'll get our top cover off, which is going to have our fuel shutoff solenoid. Here's your post for your fuel shutoff solenoid. This is your ground for the coil inside. This is your throttle arm. Down here is your mechanical time and advance unit right here. This is your fuel inlet coming into here. There should be a fuel inlet screen in here, and there's some valves in here. There's I'm trying to remember what they call that. It's like a return check in there, but you just basically pull stuff out of there and put it back exactly like you got it. They have some of these books online you can get. I've downloaded some of these off like TradeBit, you know, for some of these pumps. There's a guy on there that has a bunch of CAV pump manuals online that I've downloaded. So it's always good to have a service manual there, so in case you get a spring or something that pops out on a pump that you've never taken apart before, because I did it, my first DPS pump I ever did, I had a spring that was different than a DPA pump on the top here, because it had a, the DPA pumps don't have the scroll rings on them like a DPS pump does. Well, there was a plate up here that moved back and forth, and it had a spring and it popped off, and it's one of those things where you didn't know, well, where in the hell did that spring go? But I finally found a book on that one to where I could, it took me a long time online to find a book for that DPS pump. But I finally found one and found out where the spring went before I put it back together. Okay, well, you guys have heard me rattle on too long. We'll start getting this pump torn apart. So first thing you want to do is pull your top cover off where your fuel shutoff solenoid is. Flat bladed screwdriver. Got some shake-proof washers below these screws here. Usually those will come in the rebuild kit. Speaking of that DPS pump I rebuilt the other day, so I get the pump, I get the Delphi kit for the pump, seal kit, because all it was, that one was just leaking. And I get it and open the box up and there's no shaft seals in it. And the guy's really wanting to start cutting hay, and so I'm kind of flustered and I'm trying to find these seals somewhere. And I call the fuel injection shop that I got the seal kit from. He goes, "Oh, that's a different kit. You got to get a different kit to get the shaft seals in the kit." I'm like, dude, I told you I wanted a complete seal kit, you know? It's really irritating. Why would you even make a seal kit for the pump and not have the shaft seals in it? I just can't, it's just unbelievable. Okay. There's your coil for your fuel shutoff solenoid right there. It'll go back in here and pull on that throttle linkage. What it does, the coil does, well, I'll have to show you here. It'll shove this back to shut the fuel off on these. It'll go in and hit that right there, back in behind the throttle shaft. And you got a little groove in the case here, and there'll be a seal in here. Okay, so alright guys, here is the internal parts of your top cover here. Here's your throttle shaft. Okay, this is your throttle return spring here. Your governor is going to be pushing on that. So you're going to have this arm here. You'll see these two nuts here on this. It's like a pivot point for this comes up against the weight basket inside the pump here. I'll show you the weight basket in a minute. Basically, what this does is this is running back and forth, and right down here, if you can see this little arm right down here, that's where your metering valve is. So when you hit the throttle, say you want to hit the throttle and you give it more fuel, that's going to move that metering valve. And of course, this weight basket is going to be spinning and all this stuff. You know, these springs are all calibrated to where that's not going to let it overspeed. It's going to, you know, it's going to put tension back on the weight and start shoving that back. It'll shove that metering valve back, you know, to limit the RPMs, so it can't run away with itself. Alright, so next thing we can do is pull our fuel inlet off, and then we'll work at getting our throttle shaft out of the top here, because I'm going to completely reseal this one while I'm at it. You'll have to pull this Allen head off here, and then there's a special little clip here. You'll pull this special little clip off right here. I can get my fingers on it. Sometimes you got to get a pair of needle nose pliers and get a hold of it and pull it off, and that'll slide that throttle shaft out. Okay, so then what you can do here, remember that special little clip I was telling you about? Just take it. You'll see when I get the shaft out what I'm talking about. Pull it out with a pair of needle nose pliers. It's a little, kind of a little half moon clip, pretty special little clip. Then you can take this Allen head loose. Usually that'll just pop on out of there. Just like so. That little clip will go down in that groove right there. This hollow shaft here is just a female hollow shaft like this, and that clip basically sits down there and goes in that groove right there to hold the shaft in place. And then this will sit on here. I like to just put all this stuff back kind of where it was before I keep track of stuff. So there's your throttle shaft. And that little eye there on the throttle shaft, that's going to come back and pull on that, on the linkage going back to that arm that rides on the weight basket there on the throttle return spring, which in turn is going to be moving your metering valve. So grab you a 5/16. Take these little nuts off the end here. And a lot of the fittings on these old Stanadyne pumps and old Rusa master pumps, they were pipe thread. So usually if they're not leaking, I leave them alone, to be honest with you, and we'll put them back together. All the newer pumps have O-rings on them, so you always just reseal them. Pipe always leaks, so if it ain't leaking when you tore it apart, usually just leave them alone. Oh, I dropped it. I'm kind of sore. I just got done doing a walking beam suspension in a log truck, and I'm just sore. You guys have ever done one of those? Golly, what a pain in the ass those things are. So I grab my needle nose, and what I'll do is I'll push it to one side. There's an O-ring on each end of the shaft too. And I'll push it to the other side and pull my O-ring off the other side. And the shaft will just slide right out of there. just like that. It's kind of a special little shaft. You'll see that it's got a flat spot. It's just flat on this one side, and that was towards the front of the pump. Then it's kind of got a cut here, another cut here, and it's flat on this side too. So the two cut sides go towards the back of there. Well, one's facing up and one's towards the back of the pump. It'll only go in there one way, or it won't come out. I think that's 7/16. Go ahead and pull the fuel inlet fitting off. Here's your inlet screen right here I was telling you about. There's a little valve inside here too. It's like a check return flow or something like that in there. But you want to make sure that usually the kits will come with the new inlet screen on there. Okay, I don't know, see if I can get to that. I might have to get an end wrench to get on that. I can get it. Okay, now I remember. It's been probably a year since I've done a Stanadyne. I've done a bunch of Lucas CEV pumps here last year or so. Yeah, see that return spring rides on this stem of this right here. Here's your return spring. Got a little sleeve in there. Now we can pull that out of there. Okay, that rides up against your waste basket. That's the weight basket. Once you see it, once the weight's spread out, centrifugal force, it pushes on this, which moves this arm, which in turn moves your metering valve. And we're going to pull the metering valve out right now. Okay, there's our metering valve, and you got a little bitty spring on the bottom of your metering valve. So your metering valve just has a slot in it, and when it turns, it opens up this passage here to let fuel into the pumping chamber and the pumping elements. When it closes, it'll close it off. And this arm actually sits in that little hole right there, and that moves that metering valve back and forth for more fuel or less fuel. And this is a stop for it here. So we'll set all that stuff down right here. Okay, so now we've got the top of our top pretty much naked. We've got our fuel inlet assembly out. Now, there's going to be some fuel in here. Okay. Now we're going to do, we're going to take this little timing window off. We'll reseal that. And then we're going to take our 4 screws off the back here and take our vane pump out. A lot of people don't understand that there's actually a little vane pump. It's kind of like on a hydraulic system where you got like a charge pump to charge your main hydraulic pump. Kind of the same principle here. You got a little lift pump, this vane pump inside here to supply the main pumping element with fuel. The high pressure pumping element with fuel will supply fuel from the tank. And a lot of them will have actually a lift pump. Mechanically, like this backhoe on the other side of the block there, it's got a mechanical lift pump that runs off the cam on the other side of the block that supplies fuel to this mechanical pump. So find a good place to stand this thing. We'll put her in this flame here and clamp her down. Okay. So take your 4 cap screws out that hold your vane pump in. Somebody's had to back this off already because the safety wire's all gone. I don't know if it's really safety wire, it's just a anti-tamper, unless you know somebody's tampered with it. Okay, kind of the same principle as a DPA pump. You'll have a locating pin right here on the head, on this face of this plate. Okay, and that'll go in. That'll line up with the hole in the case, and there's a hole. Let me get this off here where you guys can see. That'll line up like that. And then there's a hole in the, I call it the eccentric ring that the vane's right in. Let me see if I can get you guys a better view of that. But that'll locate right here. Just make a note of it when you're doing these pumps. I mean, some engines have different rotations, or you know, the pump might be on a different side of the engine, so this might be over here. So just make sure, make a note, say this one's on the right hand side where the locating pin was. And then you can actually dig your O-ring out. Let me get that dug out of there. Find my pocket knife because I don't think I brought an O-ring pick in with me. Okay, and then you can grab your needle nose pliers and just pull your vane pump assembly out of there. And they're spring loaded. See the little springs in there? When I put this thing back together, we'll go through that in detail. You also want to make sure that you got this facing the right way. Okay, see this cutout right here? See, we've got CC on the back side of this pump, or on this ring. C here. The C on this one is going to face the outside. Okay, so now we can take our pumping unit out, and these can be kind of a bear to get out if they've been in there a long time. Sometimes I've had to twist on them and beat on them and just really mess with them to get them to come loose. So you'll have to take this one's got a 12-pointed bolt on it here. Take these two, I think those look like 1/2 inch, or those 7/16, those are 1/2 inch. My hand's cramping up. They're pretty snug. These will go into your pumping head here and hold it in place. And this one's got a 12-pointed bolt on it. I'm probably going to have to go out to my service truck and find a 12-pointed socket that will go on that, or an in-wrench or something. It looks like about a is that 7/16 12-point. I think that's going to be what it is. And I'll be back. Let me go find a 7/16 12-pointed socket. Flip it upside down. You'll have to take your little actuator out. Well, the first thing you want to do is actually pull these out of each side of the actuator. These will go in here like this, and actually you'll see a little rounded button that goes on the end of that mechanical actuator there. See, that comes up against the rounded portion of this and sets in there like this. There's one on each side of it. And what that does, that'll move that cam ring inside that pump to advance it left or right. So you'll have one of these on each side. This one's actually your adjustment for the mechanical advance here. So then take your special, take this and unscrew it out. And now you're ready. You can actually flip your pump right side up. Sometimes when you do this, the weight, some of the weights in the weight basket will kind of fall out on you. Now they're stiff when they come out. Now all the weights are still in the housing. That's no big deal though. I'll show you how all that goes. So, just so we're clear on this. Okay, here's your weight basket here. See, and that's going to be turning your pumping unit and everything there. So what you can do is take your dust washer, and you're going back just so you know how all that stuff goes back together. See where the lip is on this, a small edge here. That's going to go down. You'll have to curl that up underneath your thrust washer. Like so. And if you take each one of these and tip them down, you know, I should have started one on the other side, and that way it kind of held that washer centered. Anyway, you get the picture. So we're going to be taking that off anyway. So you do that on all 6 of those. See, a lot of the Delphi pumps, they'll have 2 here and 2 here. And these 2 will be empty on the Delphi and DP pumps. Okay, so pop the snap ring off. Now I got to change my snap ring pliers around to where they're expanding and not contracting. Alright. Alright, pull your weight basket off. Okay, here's your pumping unit. Okay? Pay attention to when you're doing this and you're back together with this, you're going to have an arrow for pump rotation on your cam ring. Okay, see the arrow? So this actually goes into the pump housing like that. So usually there'll be an arrow on the housing, just like this one right here. Well, this one's got an arrow going both ways. But I usually just make a note of it. Usually, oops, one of my rollers fell out. But I usually just make a note of it that, you know, it's counterclockwise facing, with the nose of the housing facing down like this. Counterclockwise is there. If you flip it like that, well, this thing is not focusing at all. That's clockwise. See, the arrow is going clockwise. With the nose down, that's the way you're going to be putting the pump back together, is with the nose down. So that's going to be counterclockwise. Okay? So, as you can see here, this spins around here. These are your pumping elements here. These rollers come up against this cam ring, and move your plungers in and out. And here is where that threaded piece that I was telling you to take out before you pull that out of there. Here's where that goes in there. That'll thread in there. And what happens is that'll move that back and forth. You know, it'll move it one way for advance and one way for retard on the timing. Then you can pop your rollers out. You know, he said he heard something snap in this pump, and I just don't see anything really broken or screwed up, really, to be honest with you. I mean, unless it's up inside the pumping unit itself, I don't think. All this is really going to do is turn your vanes. There's really nothing inside here, you know. There's some fuel galleries. So, let me get this thing, let me get the rollers out of it. Okay, now I'll show you what this actually does. When those rollers move in and out, you're going to have, okay, here's one little plunger here. You can see that. There's your other little plunger right there. And when you go back together with these, just take, you know that the shiny ends on here are going to be touching each other. Or no, I'm wrong about that. See where the shiny ends on them are? They're going to be touching where these other rollers were up against the cam ring. So when those rollers run around on that cam ring, you know, for each stroke there, this has got a 4-cylinder engine in it, so there's only going to be 4 plungers on it. So you're going to have 4 lobes here on this cam ring, and those move. These are actually your pumping elements that go in here. Okay, so they're going to move these in and out. And basically when this thing's spinning around, it lines up with the pumping. Basically, I don't know, I call it the fill port. I'm sure it's a... They basically line up with the ports and they close the port and all that to pump the fuel back into the injector, back to the delivery valve and all that, and pump the fuel in. These rotary pumps are way simpler than the inline pumps. The inline pumps are, I don't know, it just seems like to me they're, you know, you got spill timing and all that stuff to deal with, and they're kind of complicated, you know. But you'll see is this here, when this turns, this is turning the other end of your pump, which is turning your vane pump too, which is your kind of your little internal lift pump. So there's not really much more to do here on this part of it. I'm just going to reseal this thing and put it back together, because I really don't see anything like he was telling me. I just don't see anything that was broke or screwed up. I mean, this internal filter here looks pretty clean. It's actually amazingly clean for that old of a backhoe. So those guys must change their fuel filters. The shaft, when I had the shaft out, it wasn't broken. So I wonder if that thing sagged enough to where, because that other shaft has just got a notch, you know, it's just got a square that fits down on this notch. I wonder if it just slipped out. You can almost see like this has got a little wear on it here. And I wonder if it just, you know, when it got loose, it just popped back on him, is kind of what I'm wondering. So, well, there is the breakdown of a Delphi, or not a Delphi. There's the breakdown of a Stanadyne rotary pump, and they're all pretty much similar. Some of them don't have this snap ring right here that holds the weight basket on. When you pull the pumping unit out, it'll just come out with this and the weight basket will stay down in the housing. So I'll get a seal kit for this thing and we'll show you what it's like to go back together with it. Alright guys, thanks.